Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. One of my project ideas for this year is to revisit the collage compositions that I featured in videos at the end of 2023 and beginning of 2024. I'll link those videos in the description area below. The designs of the collages in those videos were simple because I wanted to convey the basic construction of each composition. Now I want to show how to elevate the designs. I chose overlapping frames composition for this video because it's one I rarely use. It's a good way to challenge yourself by working with a composition that either you rarely use or not comfortable using. Here's the photo of the overlapping frame composition from the previous video. It has a good design, but it is simple. As a reminder, the shapes for overlapping frames can be solid pieces of paper that are square and rectangle, along with cutout shapes like frames. Let's work on creating another collage, but with an elevated design. One of the design features of this new collage is that it will have strong value contrast. I'm starting by creating a ground layer using a light value monoprinted tissue papers. This light value transparent layer will contrast with the mid to dark value overlapping frames. Also, there'll be a contrast of layers. The monoprinted tissue paper will only be used on the ground layer. The overlapping frame layer will use monoprinted 80-pound papers. I encourage you to work with different types of papers in one collage because it will help to add complexity to the design. The tissue paper will be torn or roughly cut, while the overlapping frame elements will be cut with straight edges. Again, it's another way to add contrast. I like to glue a section of the tissue paper in place once I have the position decided on. I don't want the tissue paper to move while gluing. Then I'll glue down the rest of the tissue paper in sections to avoid too many wrinkles. This gluing technique is helpful when using thin papers. Another thing to consider is using papers with different patterns. The pink paper has wide horizontal stripes. Next, I chose a light gray paper with plaid pattern. I'm also changing the size and shape for the gray paper to create a sense of visual tension. By having different patterns, it keeps the viewer's eyes moving and prevents the design from looking too static. The wonderful thing about transparent papers is that it creates new colors and overlapping patterns when it's layered on top of another paper. This layering of paper gives the ground layer more depth than a single layer of solid paper. The final paper for the ground layer will be this light turquoise print. I decided to use one that didn't have an even pattern. I love using these because they have a distressed look that works well to cover the exposed white paper and as an accent. This dark burgundy square is the inspiration for this collage. It's the perfect paper for the focal point. It'll be the only element in this size and color. Before gluing down the dark burgundy square, I wanted to decide on the element that will slightly overlap it. I wanted this element to be mostly black, but as you will see, I had to audition a few papers to get the right one. This black paper was too dark. I'll insert a grayscale version so you can see why I decided that. There wasn't enough contrast between the dark burgundy element and this one. The black paper blended into the burgundy. I continued to audition black papers that had gray patterns. This black paper looked like it may work, so I cut off a piece of it to make it easier for me to decide. I'll insert another grayscale version. Again, not enough contrast. This striped paper had lighter gray in the pattern, so this paper was a better choice. Here's the grayscale version so you can see why it was the better choice. I just had to trim it down so it wasn't as large as the dark burgundy paper. Once I decided on the placement of both papers, then I glued them to the ground layer. I'm sizing down the elements by bringing in this mid-tone value gray pattern paper and cutting it very small. Size contrast is just as important to a collage as value contrast. By slightly overlapping it on top of the dark burgundy element, it connects the elements together. Also, I like to bring balance to the design by using the same pattern paper for a few elements. These elements don't necessarily have to be the same size and shape. I'll cut this element into a mid-size frame shape. As I was auditioning it, I wasn't sure if I liked the mid-tone gray frame next to the black and gray square, so I brought out a dark blue paper to see if it would work better. I encourage you to experiment with auditioning with papers with different colors and shapes. If you aren't sure, just leave it in place without gluing it while you work on another area. The choice of paper becomes clearer as the collage continues to be created. Even though the dark blue frame shape has the same value weight as the black and gray square, it's a better choice than the mid-tone gray shape mainly because it's a different color altogether. I will use a mid-tone gray frame shape in another area later. This collage needed a bold color, so that's why I chose this pink paper with circles. I also chose it because it ties in with the pink tissue paper on the ground layer. I didn't want to introduce a color that hasn't already been used in the collage. It could make the design too busy looking. As I continue building this collage, notice that the design starts to become asymmetrical. I'll add music while you watch me finish this collage, and I'll come back at the end to discuss it. As I mentioned earlier, this overlapping frame composition is asymmetrical, but it's balanced. When I draw a line down the middle, you can see how it's balanced more clearly. The design is balanced because the visual weight on both sides is similar. The left side has a large dark burgundy square and few smaller elements. The right side has many mid to smaller elements with shapes that are solid and cut out frames. The many elements on the right side is close in visual weight to the left side. Even though the left side has more physical mass, the right side has more visual activity, which creates balance. Also notice the difference when comparing the previous collage to this one. Both have some elements that trail off the edge, but having the elements at an angle in this new collage, it created more movement. Here's the grayscale version. I like to include these so you can see the value contrast, but in this collage, it's easy to see in the color version. This year, I will continue to revisit other compositions along with other types of art videos. I set up a new playlist to store the previous composition videos along with the revisited ones. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Take care.